And we're ready to go. This session is being recorded and will be available online in a day or so after the end of the session. Welcome to today's session on grading in Canvas. We're going to be looking at how to manage the gradebook in Canvas and how to grade different sorts of assessments in Canvas. I'm Dave Giberson. I'm an old instructional design coordinator who used to work for Online Learning Pathways at the district. Now I'm just an old fat guy living in northern Idaho, retired, and they've asked me to come back and help with this effort here. And I'm very delighted to do that. It's wonderful to see all my old friends here and many new ones. So I'll enjoy being here with you today. Let's take a look. Much of the day I'll be sharing my screen with you. This is Zoom's superpower. This is what makes Zoom into a virtual classroom. I will share my screen so that you can see whatever is on my computer monitor. Think of sitting in a classroom with a laptop hooked up to a projector and showing the students what you're seeing on your laptop screen. That's what sharing the screen in Zoom does, except you don't have to be in the same room. And you can see what's on my screen a lot better using Zoom than you can if you're physically present in the classroom and looking at a projected image up on the wall, especially if you're one of those folks who likes to sit in the back of the room. So in many ways, Zoom is the real-time instructional experience in Zoom is better than that in a physical classroom in many ways. And there's not much you can do in a physical classroom that you can't do in Zoom. So I know many of you are using Zoom with your remote teaching right now and lecturing much as you did before while you were in your physical classroom. So it makes Zoom makes transitioning to a remote modality a lot easier than if we had to go, all of us had to go full asynchronous online course all of a sudden. And hopefully, if you're not experienced with that, hopefully you'll get an idea of that today as we run this session on grading in Canvas. Let's go ahead. Let me go ahead and share my screen then. I don't know what's underneath there. Oh, there's Canvas. That's good. But let's take a look at an outline of today's session. I will share this with you. Got a shareable link. I'll put that in the chat tool so you can bring it up yourself now or later. You can print it out. It's not that big a deal. It's just more a set of reminders for me to not forget too much as I go through this session. But here we are. I've introduced myself. We'll talk about getting help with the gradebook here in a second. And then we're going to look at we're going to start off looking at the Gradebook tool in Canvas and about how to navigate it, how to manage it, how to control what you see and where you see it in the gradebook, how to set up grade computations in the Canvas gradebook so that you can get Canvas to average your grades for you, so you don't have to get out the calculator at the end of the term. We'll also look at the grading process in Canvas, how to grade the different types of assessments that you can use with students in Canvas, notably quizzes, any kind of test, homework assignments, and gradable class discussions. So I'll show you how to use the grading tools in Canvas as well. So let's get started with that. I'm going to go ahead and log into Canvas. You should all have Canvas accounts. If you're not already using them, if you have an active teaching contract or TAO, you have a Canvas account. Your user ID for Canvas is your 10-digit employee number from PeopleSoft. Your password for Canvas is initially set to your 8-digit birth date. Month, day, year. So if your birth date was June 1st, 1998, your password would be 06 for June, 01, 1998. No punctuation, no slashes or anything, just the numbers. If you have any trouble getting into Canvas, you can email me, or you can call the Canvas Faculty Support Hotline. You can't get that number from Canvas until you log into Canvas, but I can give that to you now. It is this one right here, 844-612-7422. I'll put that in the chat tool. Just put that at the bottom of the chat tool. You can call them and they can help you get your password reset if needed. So again, this session is going to sort of assume that you have some familiarity with Canvas and that you've begun at least thinking about building a Canvas course, and you want to know something about how you're going to grade student assessments in Canvas and how those grades will be recorded and handled. This is part of what Canvas is very good at that you can't do with Zoom. You can lecture in Zoom marvelously well, and you can communicate with your students in real time through Zoom, but you can't really assess your students through Zoom. You can't give tests. You can't accept homework through Zoom. You can't provide your students with the opportunity to communicate with you and each other on their own schedule, asynchronously, we say. So Canvas and Zoom are very much complementary when it comes to putting together a very good online course. And Zoom is an often ignored component of online education because traditionally we've done online over the last 20 years or so. Online education has been mostly asynchronous, using learning management systems like Canvas, as we're going to look at today, and synchronous tools like Zoom, in part because they were very expensive and very cranky, were not used a lot. But Zoom has really kind of changed that. And to me, an ideal online class is one where there are real-time lectures, even though students don't necessarily like that, because they like online courses because they can do them at a time of their own choosing. But if we're talking about quality of instruction, mixing real-time lectures on Zoom with instructional materials and assessments and communication tools that are available asynchronously in Canvas really provides the best online experience. So what we're kind of working into here at the district as we transition rapidly is actually probably pretty much an ideal remote instruction paradigm. And hopefully that some of those habits will last as we move, once we are able to get back in our classrooms. The tools that we're learning to use here are still in many ways just as valuable when we're teaching a class in the classroom as they are in the situation we have now. So it's we can look upon this otherwise unpleasant time as an opportunity to improve the instructional paradigm all up and down the line in all modalities as we move forward into a hopefully virus-free future, or relatively so. But one of the biggest things you can do with Canvas that you can't do with Zoom, again, is to assess your students, to give tests, to assign homework, to allow communication that is not real time, that is asynchronous on the students in your own time. And we're going to look at the a good part of the assessment part of that today, specifically at how you grade assessments in Canvas. We have another session that talks about how to create assessments and what the capabilities are and how students can submit them and so on. Today we're going to look at the part that happens after that occurs, where you've already created your assessments and your students have already taken them, and you are now looking for a way to evaluate those assessments and get those grades into a grade book where you can both record them, or where you can record them, post them for your students, and compute your final grades without having to resort to pencil and paper and a calculator or a spreadsheet like Excel. I've made a little course here that we're going to work in. It has some already has gradebook set up and has some assessments for us to grade and look at. Let's see how we're doing here. Okay, we got some Zoom questions in there for later, and that's good. And I'll try to keep an eye on that chat tool as we go along as best I can until we get too hot and heavy into the middle of the gradebook here. The gradebook in Canvas is accessed through your course menu through a link named Grades, appropriately enough. And if you click on that, you'll see your gradebook. It's by default in a fairly standard ledger type format. Each column in the gradebook represents a separate assessment: a quiz, a homework assignment, a graded discussion. Those are your three principal assessment types in Canvas. Each row, of course, is a student. I've got a few, you should forgive the term, dummy students in here that we can use for demonstration purposes. Let's just take a brief look at this, at some of these options here that we have. The gradebook can be viewed as a standard ledger type display, just like you'd have in a paper gradebook, or you can look at individual views for particular students. You just select a student, and you can see all of the grades for that student. There's not much in here right now because we haven't started grading. Maybe that one has a little bit more. Yeah, that one's got at least a test in there already graded. So if you want to see detailed information on individual students, you can do that. Or you can go back up here in the upper right-hand corner. Let me move that out of the way of that little video window on your portable device. There's an option to select Gradebook View again. And you'll spend most of your time in this standard Gradebook View. Student grades, of course, appear in these cells as they're earned. Columns in the gradebook are automatically created when you create an assessment in Canvas, when you create a quiz or create a homework assignment or create a gradable discussion. A column for that assessment is automatically created in the gradebook. So you don't have to create gradebook columns, generally. There are situations where you may want to do that, and I'll show you how to manually create gradebook columns a little later, excuse me. But that's not the usual mode of operation in Canvas. Under View, we can arrange our gradebook, and that by arrangement they mean the order of the assessments that you see, by assessment name, by due date. You can sort by number of points, or you can sort by the modules in which these assessments are linked. But by default, the order of the columns in your gradebook is determined by the order of assessments displayed in the Assignments tool in Canvas, in the Canvas course menu. If I bring up that course menu here, usually when you go into the gradebook, Canvas minimizes the course menu, so you have a maximum amount of horizontal space to view the gradebook. But you can always bring the Canvas course menu back up by clicking this menu tool in the upper left-hand corner of the gradebook display. And the Assignments tool will be in your course menu. This one's right there. Its exact position will vary depending on how you've set up your course menu. But there it is. And the Assignments tool in Canvas lists all of the gradable items within the course, all of the assessments. Indeed, this tool should not say assignments, it should say assessments. I don't know why they do that, because these are not all homework assignments, which is what we tend to associate with the word assignment in an LMS. But this contains all of your gradable items, your tests, your homework assignments, and your gradable discussions. When you get your blank shell that has nothing in it, which you will get at the beginning of each term, and if you're just starting out with Canvas in the middle of this term, there are Canvas shells, containers, course sites available for each of the courses that you're currently teaching, sitting in Canvas waiting for you to put content, to develop them, to put content and assessments and so on into them. Because we do that automatically for every course that is offered at the district. Every course section offered at the district gets a separate Canvas shell, and it sits there, and if you don't use it, it doesn't take up much space, and we just don't worry about it. But now almost everyone is using their Canvas shells. So they're getting, so they're there waiting for you. And in fact, your students have been enrolled in those shells, though they don't yet have access to them until you publish the course. They're enrolled in those shells, so you don't have to worry about that either. But the shell, when you first get it, is totally empty. And you can see how I've got my assessments grouped here by tests, as homework assignments, and discussions. But in a blank shell, when you go to the Assignments tool, all you see is a single, and each one of these, like tests, assignments, discussions, is called by Canvas an assignment group, kind of like a grading category in Blackboard, if you are familiar with Blackboard. And these I had to make myself. The default situation when you get the blank shell is you have one assignment group. When you click on the Assignments tool, you see one assignment group, and it's called assignments, plural. And if you don't change that, if you don't add more groups, assignment groups, when you create assessments like tests, homework assignments, and so on, they automatically go into that single assignment group called assignments, plural. Now I've taken that one out and I've reassorted my assignments among 3 different assignment groups. And I made the groups by just clicking Add Group. I gave it a name, and I saved it, and the new group appeared down at the bottom of the display here. I was able to move assessments between groups just by clicking and dragging them like that. So it's very easy to reassort your assessments among assignment groups if you've made more than the one that you're provided with. A question I would probably ask at this point is, do you have to do that? Or can you just leave them all in one assignment group and not worry about it? And the answer to that is it depends on how you're going to weight your grades for computation of your final course average. Obviously, when you're computing your final course average, you need to weight the different components, the different assessments relative to one another, so that maybe a final exam has more weight, more influence on the final grade than a pop quiz would. And we'll talk more about weighting grades in Canvas and how you do that, and what your options are and so on. But one of the options you have for weighting grades in Canvas doesn't require you to create multiple assignment groups and assort your assessments among them, and the other one does require you to do that. So I'm going to just show you how to do this, or I'm showing you how that's done, just in case. Besides, it makes it a little easier for you to keep track of the different assessments that you put in there. If you segregate them by type, and perhaps by class of assessment, it's easier for you to keep track of them in the assignments tool as well. The order, and what started this whole discussion, was explaining to you how the default order of the assignments, or of the columns in your gradebook, I should say, is determined. And that is determined by the order in which the assignments are listed. Not so much by the groups, but the order in which the individual assignments are listed here. So the first assessment, the first column I'm going to see in my gradebook right now is one containing the syllabus quiz, and the last one will be one called first recording. Let's see if that's the case. If we go back to the gradebook, yep, there's the syllabus quiz at the beginning, and at the end, first recording is the last one. So, and everything else is in the same order that you find things in the assignment group. So that's how you get started. However, once you're in the gradebook, you can, if you wish, move grade columns around very simply by clicking and dragging. That doesn't change the order in which your assignments are displayed in the assignments tool, but it does allow you to group things differently if you wish, very easily. If you remember the gradebook and Blackboard, rearranging columns was quite tedious. Here it's really simple. So you can arrange the assessment columns in your gradebook any way you like, very quickly. This does not, I hesitate to indicate, or I don't hesitate to indicate, that this does not affect the order in which the students see the grades in their grades tool. Theirs will by default be listed in the order that's in your assignments tool, but they can change that. They can determine the order in which their assessments are listed in their grades tool. So you can't really be sure of the order in which they're viewing their assessments, but everything that appears in your gradebook for a particular student will show up as an item in their grades display. And when we get some grading and stuff done here, I'll show you what a student grade display looks like. So your you know what your students are seeing. All right, how are we doing? Nothing that's critical right this minute in the chat tool. Thank you. Just keep putting those questions if they're long-term kind of things in the chat tool. But if you have a question about something I've just said, and you think it'll be a fairly quick question, just unmute yourself and pipe right up. And I'll be happy to take that question, and we'll see where that leads us. If it's something I need to put off for a little while, I'll just let you know. So don't worry about asking.
Hey, Dave, I want to.
Yes. Yes.
So when I copied courses from last time, and some of the assignments show up in the gradebook sort of pink, but they're from the previous gradebook. And if I just those columns, even if it says test bank, that's not a problem, right?
Well, the pink, I think, just means that it's the due date is passed, and you'll just have to fix the due dates and so on.
Okay.
As
I
you,
think
from
what
the
happened
middle
was,
course, obviously, you're going to have to update those dates. But no, the gradebook should, from a previous course, should come over just fine, except, of course, it will be empty of grades. The grades are not transferred over, nor are the student enrollments. Your new students will appear in the gradebook automatically, and there'll be no grades in there right off the bat.
okay, thanks.
Okay. So, let's see, display columns. You can, let's see, we've seen the gradebook views. We can arrange the assignments or the columns automatically in certain orders. We can filter by assignment groups if we wish, or modules. So if you want to just see the assignments that are associated with a particular module, or the assessments that are associated with a particular module, you can click on that and they'll be organized by. And here's my tool. And if by default, I see everything in all modules. But if I want to see just those assessments that are associated with my, let's see, where's my why screencasting module? I can click on that, and now I see a subset of the gradebook columns, and I don't have to sort through everything, every assessment in the course. Or I can go back at any time to all modules and see everything. Statuses, you've got late, missing, resubmitted, dropped, excused. It's a little hard to see, but that's actually salmon pink. Late assignments are shaded in salmon pink. Missing assignments also in salmon right now. And you can change that, resubmitted, dropped, excused, and so on. You can set color codes in grade columns that tell you at a glance that, okay, that assignment is now late. So everybody should have taken that, and so on. You can insert into the gradebook a notes column if you wish. That column appears just to the right of the student's name by default. You can make it a little bigger if you like. And you can enter into that column notes about that student. The students do not see the notes column, so you don't have to worry, or they don't see the notes that you've typed about them. But if, for instance, we're a DSPS student, you could note that. So you'd remember that when you were grading. You can put any sort of information that you might need in there to remind yourself of something about that student that will have some bearing on the grading. Or you can choose not to have that column. the default is not to have it, but you can create it by just clicking here. And you can choose whether to show unpublished assignments, assignments that you are still working on but you have not yet published for students. You can choose to show those in the gradebook or not, as you prefer. Unpublished assignments, if they are displayed, are so labeled in bold and in red, so you don't have any doubt about whether an assignment has been published or not in the gradebook. But if you want to keep those assignments in mind and have them lined up in appropriate places in the gradebook for your own convenience, you can do that. Actions here are import or export. You can export your gradebook to a file that can be opened in a spreadsheet like Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets. One reason to do this is to keep a backup of your gradebook that's separate from your course. If you periodically export your gradebook and drop it into Excel, you have a backup of your course grades in case there's some sort of catastrophic event. All the time we've used Canvas and in all the time we used Blackboard before that, we never had a catastrophic event where student grades were lost permanently. I suppose it could happen someday. And if it were me, I'd be much more comfortable knowing I had my grades handy. It's especially a good idea to do that at the end of the term when everything has been, all the grades have been entered and your grades have been computed, to have a copy of that gradebook handy and stored away in a folder somewhere on your hard drive and maybe backed up somewhere. That can be very handy in case of a grade challenge later on. Just a quick look at the gradebook may be enough to resolve such a situation. And it's easier to have a quick look at the gradebook than it is to go back in and search through your Canvas course and look for evidence of why you assigned a particular grade. So it's very handy to export your gradebook periodically. You can also do a gradebook import. And the way that's usually used, if you export your grades to your gradebook to Excel, you can set up your grade computations in Excel, which has much more powerful grade computation capabilities than the Canvas gradebook. So you can do your grade computations in Excel, and then you can import those back into Canvas later so that your students can see what their grades were. You can't post your Excel spreadsheet for students for obvious reasons. Not even one, you can't even email them, say, a copy, of one line in your gradebook that referred to them, in your one line or one row in your Excel spreadsheet that referred to them, because email is not a secure medium. Somebody else could see that email. It would be a FERPA violation. Posting grades in Canvas is just about the only legal way to do it, or in some LMS, because only the student whose grades they are can see them. And so you can import your grades back in from Excel and put them into your Canvas gradebook, even though you're doing your actual grade computations in Excel. But I would say the vast majority of the time, the grade computation capabilities in the gradebook in Canvas will be enough for you. And they will save you a tremendous amount of time, either in pencil and paper and calculator work, or in setting up an Excel spreadsheet. So chances are pretty good you're going to be able to use Canvas to compute your final grades. Let's see. There's not a whole lot more. You have a search box where you can search. If you have a huge class and you want to search for a particular student, you can do it that way. That's obviously not an issue here. We have a settings tool where you can set up things like late policies and grade posting policies. Late policies allow you to automatically adjust grades for late submission, assuming you allow that at all. This is not a big deal if you set in your assessments, if you set your due date and your display until date to the same value so the students can't get into the assessment after the due date, then late policies are not so relevant to you. But if you do allow students to submit late, but with reductions, grade reductions appropriate, you can automatically apply grades for missing submissions, and that might be a 0%. You can automatically apply deductions to late submissions, and you can set the amount to deduct by percent when something is late, and you can set late submission deduction intervals. The options are days or hours. So the way this would be set up, you set a late submission deduction percent that might be 10%. And you might do that by the hour. So if a student submits something late, every hour that passes after the due date, or after the due date and time, whatever grade they ultimately get from you when you grade it, or if the grade is for a quiz that is automatically graded, whatever grade they got when it was first submitted will be reduced by 10% every hour that passes until the grade either just goes away, or you can set a you can set a floor on that, a lowest possible grade percent. Maybe if they've turned it in at all, you don't want to drop them to less than 50% of the grade they would have gotten if they turned it in on time, or not.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
Regarding the gradebook, when you set up a percent deduction, does the Canvas gradebook work in fractions or decimal point? So somebody could get a 9.2 on a quiz or something like that.
You could, depending on your question values, yeah, it could easily be a fractional grade.
Okay, and it doesn't balk at that at all.
Pardon?
It doesn't balk at fractions or decimals or whatever.
Oh, no. But you cannot, unlike Blackboard, for instance, you can't set the preferred number of decimal places to display. It will, and when computing final grade percentages, for instance, it will display 2 decimal places, no more, and no less. So you don't have a lot of control over that. But yes, you can have fractional grades, and certainly you can have fractional final averages.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Good question. I'm going to uncheck these because I don't generally use that, but these are things that can help. Grade posting policies, basically this is, by posting, they mean when will the grades be visible to the students? And by default, they are visible to students as soon as they're entered. With manually posted grades, you have to manually release the grades when you're ready. The vast majority of times you'll leave that automatic. And you may never use late policies. So these are kind of esoteric options in the gradebook here, which may or may not be of interest to you, but we want to mention them. And I see an excellent question in the chat tool here that I was anticipating and hoping for. What if we have assignments or grade, what if we had grades in our paper grade books right now that were earned before we had to move online? Is there any way to get those into the Canvas grade book so they can all be, so the grades can all be displayed to the students together, and perhaps so that Canvas can average our final grades at the end of the term? Yes, there is a way to do that. Let me see where I am here in the outline and see if this is a good time to do that. We've gone through all that. Grading schemes and letter grades. Yeah, this is as good a time as any to do that. So I'm sure, even under normal circumstances, if you're using Canvas as a supplement to your face-to-face class, there will be assessments that you don't have your students do in Canvas. Also, there may be assessments that just don't fit into any of the categories that you have in Canvas. So it's useful to be able to create grade columns manually and then just enter grades into them manually. This is particularly going to be useful now, but when you've got probably quite a few grades for assessments that you did in the classroom, the students handed in to you directly or that were completed in some other way and you've written down a grade for them. So how do you get those grades into Canvas? You'll notice that there's no obvious tool here in the gradebook that will allow you to manually create a gradebook column. These are all automatically created when the assessments that they correspond to were created elsewhere in Canvas. So how do you create a gradebook or a gradebook column that is not already there? To do that, and you can do that, but it's a little bit more involved of a process than it was in Blackboard. That I don't often say that about Canvas, but it's true in this case. If we go to do this, we have to go to the Assignments tool in the course menu. And we have to manually add an assignment. This is not an assignment you're going to put into a course module. It's, in all probability, it is one because it's something that the students are not going to fulfill from within Canvas. These are things that they've already done that you just want to record the grades for. You'll have to give the assignment a name. And it might be the name of a test that they took in class, or the name of an activity that they performed for a grade, like going on a field trip and writing a report about it or something like that, and something that they turned into you manually on paper. So the name here could be anything, maybe chapter test 1, which took place long before you started using Canvas. Whatever it might be, you can name it appropriately. There's probably no need to put in a description of it, though you can if you wish. You do need to assign this some number of points that's appropriate for this. I'll just leave that at 20. If this was a test by my organization here, that would go into the tests assignment group rather than homework assignments or discussions. But you might have different setups there. You can display the grades for the assignment as points or as a percentage. Those are the most common options. Or it could be just a yes/no, satisfactory, unsatisfactory, complete, incomplete type grade, where the student did it or they didn't. There's no middle ground. and they get all the points or none. You can also set this up to display as a letter grade. And I'll talk about setting up letter grade scales here in a little bit. Or you can use the GPA, the 4.0 GPA scale, or you can just say this is not graded. Your submission type, and the key to this process is no submission or on paper. Either one basically has the same impact. There's no way for the student to have turned this in Canvas, so it's a no submission assignment. We're just trying to make a gradebook column. We don't really care anything else about this assignment. We're not going to peer review it. We're not going to set due dates or whatever. All that's in the past. That's all done with. We just want the gradebook column. So at minimum, what we have to do is give it a name, a number of points, probably assign it to an assignment group. Though if you're just leaving everything in the one assignment group named assignments, you don't have to worry about that. Set the submission type to either no submission or on paper. It really doesn't matter. And then just save the assignment object. And you'll never use that for anything in the assignments tool. But we will now have a column for this in the gradebook. If we go to the grades tool, and it'll probably be way out at the right hand end here. There it is. Oops, I forgot to publish it. I really need to publish it, or I can't even enter grades into it in the gradebook. So let's go back one and publish this sucker. There we go. Now Canvas will be happier. So there it is, chapter test 1 out of 20. But the only way grades are ever going to appear in this column is if you enter them manually from your paper gradebook. So that's real easy to do. You just click in the cell where you want to enter a grade manually. And you can do this most anywhere else in the gradebook, though it's usually not appropriate, but you can. We can just click right into that cell there and say this student got a 15. Just press enter, and the student got a 10 and a 12. You can just enter the grades very quickly. And so it doesn't take you long, even with a fair-sized class, it doesn't take you very long to transcribe those grades from your paper gradebook or wherever you have them into the Canvas gradebook. But that's how you will handle a situation where you have a bunch of grades already recorded in your class that had nothing to do with that happened before you ever logged into Canvas. You can.
I have a question, Dave.
Good.
Yeah, I'm in continuing education, and I know the colleges use this more often, but do a lot of teachers use this gradebook, even if they're not teaching an online class? Because
Yes.
then the students have access to it.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's the main motivation for doing that. This is the only way you can really safely and legally post grades for your students.
Thank you.
And comply with FERPA. And it also gives you the option to compute your grades in Canvas, so you don't have it saves your work. Yes.
Right.
Dave, I have a quick question that applies to this. I'm
Good.
that type of instructor that uses my Canvas shell to record grades, although everything is done in class. So for the remaining exams, I've created online exams. How do I delete my old exams? Because now it's showing 2 exam 3. So I want to delete the one that I would manually put in. Do I just hover over up at the top and go to those 3 little dots to edit?
No, unfortunately, you can't do that there. There's no delete option there.
Or just change the
Blackboard.
points to 0?
No, well, you could do that, but I could get rid of this column here quite easily, but I have to go back to the assignments tool to do it.
Okay.
I go back to the assignments tool and I'll find this assignment. I put it in test, there it is. I can just go in the assignment tool out here to the context menu for that, the action link,
Correct.
if you will, for that test, and I can delete it right here.
Perfect.
If I do that, that'll get rid of the gradebook column.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good question. So I can, since that's a test and I seem to have my tests up front here in the gradebook, I might want to take this column and drag it down and put it with my other tests, or I might not care. Let's see. Uh-oh, where did I drop that? There it is. Because you can't drag it all the way in one shot. But there it is. So I can always rearrange these gradebook columns for me by just clicking and dragging them left and right in the gradebook. So did that answer the question about how to put your old grades in?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent.
Dave,
That
would
was
it
something.
have a
Yes.
Excel spreadsheet, and we have a lot of grades in the past and not too many more left. And we were just going to enter the grades into that Excel spreadsheet. But we do have, of course, what they are currently taking in Canvas there.
Mhm.
So they'll be, instead of entering all the old ones in, could we just force the final grade that we're seeing on our Excel spreadsheet, and that's okay for their final
Yes.
grade?
Yes. Yeah, you can import that in and then just display it to the students in Canvas, yes, and have Excel compute the final grade rather than Canvas.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a few possible issues you might run into there, but they are generally solvable. And there are Canvas guides that will show you how to do that. That's a little bit esoteric for our presentation today, but I can give you, if you'll email me, I'll send you the tutorial information on how to make that work and what your limitations, if any, are. But that generally, yes, that process will work for you. So, so that's how we create manual columns. Let's see. Grade display options. Each column has a little context menu at the top of the column, which you can access by mousing over the column header and clicking on that little menu there. You can sort the gradebook on this column if you want to, by grade, low to high or high to low, or by missing or late submissions, so that you can find those quickly. That will sort the entire gradebook. Usually you wouldn't sort the entire gradebook on a single grade column, though. Usually you would do that on the total column out here at the end. And you'd sort usually high to low. So you have your, it depends on your preferences. But so you have your highest grades at the top, and you can just work your way on down and decide where your cutoffs are going to be. So it's just a matter of sort by grade high to low, and there we go, he said. Oh, it was getting to me there. Wait a minute, 95 is not the lowest grade. No, this bottom row in the spreadsheet or in the gradebook is for something called test student. That test student is you when you go into your Canvas course in student view. When you do that, when you go to your home screen and go to student view, you're actually logged into the course as a student named test student. This student can take tests, submit assignments, participate in discussions, most all the stuff that a regular student can do. And when you leave student view to become yourself again, to log that student out and log yourself back in automatically, if you do not reset that student will remain in your gradebook at the bottom, in the bottom row in the gradebook, always. Even if you have a student named Zelensky in there, the test student will be at the bottom. And you can use that test student for a lot of things. I'm going to use it as a demonstration tool here today. And it's very handy to have. So usually I like to leave my test student in the course and not reset it, but leave it in the gradebook so that I can do certain testing and what if games and so on with that student without messing with an actual student's grades. So that's why when I sorted the gradebook, let me leave student view without resetting the student. So whatever the student has done in this course remains in there. Grades, submissions, the whole 9 yards. And go back to the grade tool, the gradebook. So when I sorted that column, I sorted the gradebook on the total column, which is the most common option. This row did not sort in because it's an outlier. It's a fake student, and we don't want that interspersed with our others. That gets me every time I do that. I forget that it's not going to sort the test student in like that. Very well. Let's see, what else can we do here that's useful? We can use the gradebook as a messaging tool to alert students to certain things. You can message students who, for chapter test 1, haven't been graded, or who scored less than or more than a certain cutoff. So you can very quickly message everyone who failed chapter test 1 and give them a little encouragement, warning, whatever. And you can just, you have a subject and a message box. You can just type a brief text message and shoot that off. So you can communicate with your students right from within the gradebook upon grade concerns or congratulations. God, you did a great job in that. Curve grades, I strongly recommend staying away from that. You can set the default grade, but that's really not especially useful. You might think, well, I could set the default grade to 0, and then the 0 would be averaged in if the student didn't submit the assignment, but it doesn't really work that way. That's more for your purposes than theirs, so I'm not going to worry about that. You can hide the grades. You can choose to enter the grades as either points or percentage. Points is the default. And you can change the grade posting policy for this particular grade to be either automatic or manual. Hide grades, and this will tell you, students will not get notifications about the grades, nor will they be able to see their grades until you unhide it. So if you're in the process of grading, say, and you don't want any of the students to see a grade until everyone has their grade, you can hide these grades, and then you have to say yes twice, and you get a little indication at the top of the column that the students are not seeing these grades, and then it'll stay that way until you Thought you could unhide that here. Uh-oh. I gotta look into that. I probably didn't read the entire message there, did I? Okay, I'll get that back to you on that. I'm not gonna fumble around with that right now. That's not something you'll use very often anyway.
David,
All
I've got a
right.
question, if it's okay.
Yes.
Can I ask a question? I've had this happen where I wanted to give a student an exception. They had to race out of town because somebody died and they're gone for a week. So I want to, because normally I set a open until close date. Is there a way I
Right.
can open a test for somebody as an exception?
Yes, there certainly is. That's kind of a question about assessments, which I'll be happy to take at the end of the session here. It doesn't have anything to do specifically with the grade book or
Oh,
with
okay.
grade data, but I will be happy. I did see that come through in the chat tool, and I'll be happy to answer that question when we
Okay.
get to it in context.
I'll mute.
So you can control how the grades are displayed, notably by either points or percentages. And I'll figure out how to get that unhid here in a little bit. Ah, hate it when Canvas surprises me. What I'm operating on here, this is something called the new gradebook. And the gradebook that we first started with when we started using Canvas was a little different. And obviously I've just run on to one of those differences that I hadn't thought about. So I'll find that for you and get that back to you. That's one of the reasons I asked for your email addresses, in case there's something that goes wrong in the middle of the presentation that I can fix later. So let's see. Your total column, let's talk about that now, is by default shown at the very end of the gradebook, the right-hand end. You can, however, move it to the front if you prefer. If you want to put it up right next to your student names when you're assigning grades at the end, that's a very reasonable thing to want to do. You can also display your total points, your total column, either as percentages or points. And you can change that. Again, I don't know how to get rid of that hidden thing there. I really stepped in it there. Or you can take the default of displaying it as a percentage. That's entirely up to you. Depends on the way you grade. But the total column is computed automatically. You can't override it or anything like that. You can't enter a grade there. The total column is computed in the manner of a running total. That is, the total column reflects only the grades or only the assessments that the students have attempted. If a student has not turned in an assignment or at all, that the grade for that assignment will not be counted for or against them. It's unaffected. It doesn't affect the grade total. So that can give the student an unreasonably inflated view of their progress in the course. Oh, I got a 90% in the course. Well, you only turned in one assignment. You should have turned in 5 by now. So you're not doing nearly as well as you think. So that's just the way the total grade column is computed in Canvas. In Blackboard, we could change that behavior. In Canvas, you can't. That's the way the grade is computed. So the only way to ensure that students get a realistic view of how they're doing to this point is to make sure that any unsubmitted assignments have a grade of 0. And you can do that just by clicking on the link, clicking on the cell and entering a 0. So it's important to make sure that happens. And that's the way to control that, to make sure that what the student sees in their running total is indicative of the work, the quality of the work they've done to that point in the course. Okay, total column. By default, as I say, the total column is displayed as percentages. But you can also have Canvas assign letter grades in the total column automatically using cutoffs that you specify to Canvas, so-called grading schemes. That option is set course by course. So to set that in your course, you can't do it in the gradebook. You have to go back to the course menu and go to Settings and go to Course Details. And if you scroll down in Course Details, you'll find an option about 2/3 of the way down called Grading Scheme. And if you want to use letter grades in the gradebook, you have to set a grading scheme. Well, that's not strictly true. You can mock it up. But basically, if you want Canvas to automatically assign letter grades, you have to enable a grading scheme. So you just check that box there, and then you're asked to set the grading scheme you want to use. The default grading scheme in Canvas, in a Canvas course, is not consistent with what we do at the practices district. It includes pluses and minuses and cutoffs that we don't use. So, but you can select another grading scheme. And we have added at the system level, we've added a so-called standard scheme, which you can use. And it's the more traditional ABCDF 90, 80, 70, 60 cutoffs. You can use this grading scheme if you wish, just by using this grading standard, clicking on that. You can manage grading schemes, which means you can create your own if you wish by adding a grading scheme here. You can edit this grading scheme. Don't want to do grading periods. No. Well, actually, you can't edit the standard grading scheme, but what you can do is add your own grading scheme. And you can name it, and you can cut out the pluses and minuses if you're not using those, as you won't at the district. And then you can reset your cutoffs so that A is, the range for an A is 90 to 100 or 92, whatever cutoffs you use. That's your choice, your academic freedom to choose that. And so you can just you can edit this and then save the named grading scheme and use that instead of the standard scheme that we've given. Entirely up to you. But if you set the standard grading scheme, then that's what will be used. So now if I go back and look at the gradebook, since I've updated the course for that, now along with the percentages in the total column, the students also see a letter grade automatically. And again, these are running totals, incremental grades that will change as the student submits more assignments. But at least they can see where they are right now very clearly and what they will get as a letter grade if they maintain this level of performance. it is also, and that's great if you're willing to take those hard and fast cutoffs, but that was never I know that was never the way I assigned final grades. I would just sort my grade book, whatever I was using, from high to low, and I'd look for natural breaks. And if somebody had an 89.5, and then the next highest grade was like 87, I would be, depending on my overall evaluation of that person's efforts, I might be inclined to give them an A instead of a B. Cut them a little slack. And this automatic assignment of letter grades doesn't give you that option. So is there a way you can put a manual column in where you can manually, you can just look at the totals and manually enter the grades? And yes, there is a way to do that. It involves creating a no submission assignment like we did before. Just go to the Assignments tool and add an assignment. I'm just going to call this manual letter grade column. No points. This is not a grade. I'm not actually going to put grades in this column. I'm just going to put symbols. I do have to display grades as letter grade. I don't want to count this toward the final grade in any way. This is just a label column. And I believe that's all I have to do. I'll save that. And that column should be at the end of the, and publish it. And that column should be in the grade book now. It should be we at the right end. I can scroll the grade book horizontally, of course. And there it is. And now I can just enter letter grades manually. And personally, that's what I do, because I like to be the one, I like to set my cutoffs dynamically, depending on the situation and my overall evaluation of the student's work. But that's up to you, obviously. Okay. Next thing we want to talk about is how to have, how Canvas computes that final total column. How does Canvas arrive at these numbers here, these percentages? Well, if you're having Canvas compute percentages, if you have Canvas display the total as points, it just adds up the points the student earned, period. And you then make the decisions on grade cutoffs and things like that. But if you have the grades displayed as a percentage, by default, what Canvas will do is just add up all the points earned by a particular student and divide that by the sum of the possible points of all the assessments that you set up when you create the assessments, multiplied by 100, and that's the percentage grade. Seems straightforward enough. But then you have to ask yourself, now wait a minute, how is that grade weighted? How do we control how much one assignment counts versus another assignment? Well, in this event, you weight individual assessments by the number of points, possible points you assign to them. An assessment that's worth 20 possible points has twice the weight of an assignment or of a quiz or something that has a possible points of 10. So that's probably conceptually the simplest way to weight your grades. Just assign a number of possible points to each assessment that reflects the relative importance of that assessment to the overall final grade. Conceptually, it's very simple, but in practice, it's kind of aggravating because every time you make an assessment, you have to think, well, how much is this worth relative to the other assessments I've got in my course? Should this be 10 points? Should it be 15? Should it be something in between? And that there's a lot of skull sweat involved in that I don't like to do. I don't like to make those judgments on such a micro scale. Also, that's particularly problematic with tests, because let's say you want a test to have a certain weight. Well, it has to have a certain total possible points then. And you can't just set the possible points for a test in one box. The total possible points for a test are determined by the sum of the total possible points for each question in the test. And so now you get into a situation where you say, well, I got 10 questions in the test, but the test needs to have a weight, and each question's worth 1 point, but initially, but the test needs to have 20 possible points in order to fit into my weighting scheme. So I got to give every test question 2 points credit. And it gets even more complicated, of course, if you're not working with nice even numbers. You can end up with having to put fractional point values on questions in a test. Like every question in a test may have to, or some of the questions in the test may have to have 1.5 points credit or 1.3 points. And that just gets into a lot of manual arithmetic and so on. It's just a pain in the keister. So even though just weighting your course grades by individual, by the points possible for each individual assessment is conceptually simple, in practice, it's kind of a pain. There's another option for weighting your grades in Canvas that is much easier to set up. It's a little more, it requires a little more effort to conceptualize, but it's much easier to set up, and it's much easier to align with what you'll often say in your syllabus. Like you might say in the syllabus, well, in this course we're going to have weekly quizzes, we're going to have chapter tests, we're going to have homework assignments, class participation, and a final exam. Or maybe you might throw chapter tests in there and so on. And each one of those may count a certain percentage. Maybe the weekly quizzes count 15% of the total grade. Maybe the chapter tests are 25. Maybe the final exams 30, and the other stuff throws in enough to add up to 100%. Well, if you tell your students that sort of thing in your syllabus, it's very easy to set up that same weighting in Canvas without you having to worry about how many possible points there are for each assessment. What you do, of course, is you create assignment groups in Canvas. Remember, I said that you didn't have to create multiple assignment groups. And you don't have to unless you want to weight your grades by assignment group, which is a lot easier to set up. You just have to set up your assignment groups to do it. So you look at your syllabus and you see what each of the categories of gradable items that you list in your syllabus are, and you create an assignment group for each of those. In my case here, I've just created 3: tests, homework assignments, and discussions. And let's say I intend to make the tests 30%, and the assignments, I don't know, let's make the tests 40%, the assignments 40%, and the discussions 20%, or something like that, something that adds up to 100%. How can I weight that how can I tell Canvas to use those weights in the gradebook? And it turns out that it's super simple to do. Once you've made your decision about how you're going to group your assessments into a set of categories, each of which has its own percentage weight, you just go to this settings menu in the upper right-hand corner of your assignments tool, and you select assignment groups weight. You tell Canvas that instead of weighting assessments by the individual point values that you've assigned to them, to weight them by these percentages, you just click that box, and now you get an entry line for each of your assignment groups. And this is like I say, this is an artificially simple set of assignment groups. I'd probably also at least have a final exam group with just the one final exam in it, so I could weight that separately. But I might not. So I've just decided to weight my grades by these three categories, these three assignment groups. And I just assign the weight that I want to each one by percentage. Say 40% for tests, 40% for assignments, and 20% for graded discussions. And of course, this has to add up to 100%, or Canvas won't accept it. And then I just save that. The assignment groups are now labeled with their relative weights. I go back to the gradebook. I'll see a column for each of the assignment groups. That's what's going on down here. To this point, I've had no assignment grades or discussion grades recorded here. We'll fix that in a moment. I've got some test grades. But it tells you here that your grade computation is going to be weighted by assignment group, and it shows you what the weights are. Now it doesn't matter how many possible points you've assigned to any of these assessments, because everything is done by percentage. Canvas just figures the percentage of the possible points that the student has earned for a particular assignment and plugs that into a weighted average formula that you don't have to worry about. Canvas takes care of all the arithmetic. So you're freed from having to worry about, well, gee, this test has 30 points in it, and that test has 40 points, but they're supposed to have the same overall impact. The weight of the two tests and the final analysis, final grade computation is supposed to be the same. So gosh, I got to go back and I either got to add 10 points from one test or take 10 points away. You don't have to do that kind of stuff anymore. Almost use the C word. You don't have to do that stuff anymore. You just let the tests be whatever point values you like. You can assign whatever's convenient for the point values for any other assignments or any other homework assignments or graded discussions. Shoot, you could just give them all a possible points of 100, so it's easy to keep track of the math in your head when you're assigning grades within an assessment. It just doesn't matter what the possible points are as far as weighting the grades in the final grade computations. So to me, it's a lot simpler, or there's a lot less work in the long run, to set up assignment groups that categorize your different assignments and that allow you to not worry about the possible points and let Canvas do all the arithmetic. That, of course, is entirely up to you. And I'll be happy to answer individual questions about that later. Another thing that setting up assignment groups, by the way, allows you to do is to edit individual assignment groups in such a way, there's the tests group, edit them in such a way that you can, there. This allows you to drop the lowest grade within an assignment group. So if you have an assignment group that's set up for a bunch of weekly quizzes, and rather than giving students opportunities to make up those quizzes if they miss them, you may just say, well, I'll drop the lowest grade. If you don't make a quiz, well, that's your lowest grade, and it won't affect your grade. But you only get to do that once or twice or whatever. You can set that up here. You can drop the lowest score in an assignment group for each student by just typing a number there. You could drop the lowest one, or if you have a lot of grades, you could drop the lowest two, whatever's appropriate. You can also be, theoretically, if you're going to take out the lowest ones, you ought to take out the highest outliers as well to give you an entirely rational view of the student's performance. If anybody tries that, I'd love to hear how your students react to that. I think it will probably involve torches and pitchforks, but maybe. I've never dropped the highest score in a range of grades. I've never had the fortitude to do that, even though theoretically it should be the most valid way of evaluating a student. If there's an assessment in that group within that assignment group that you never want to drop, no matter what, this one they've got to turn in and they're going to have the grade counted no matter what, you can add an exception to that so you never drop that particular assignment. That doesn't come up very often, but you do have that option. So you can save that so the lowest test grade will be dropped for that student. And you can't do that unless you set things up unless you set assessments up within assignment groups, at least the ones that you want to drop the lowest one of. That comes up a lot. Can you display both the letter grade and the percentage grade only for the total column, not for each individual assessment? Just notice that in the chat tool. Very well. That sort of covers the gradebook. That's most of the capabilities built into the Canvas gradebook. If you have exceptionally complex grading procedures, this may not be adequate to it, in which case you'll probably be computing your grades in Excel and just importing them into the Canvas gradebook. But if you can get by with these basic capabilities, Canvas will very reliably and very quickly average your grades for you. Now let's talk about how we get grades into the gradebook. We've seen that we can enter grades manually, and you can do that in just about any. You can override a grade for just about any gradebook entry, but that's not normally what you'll want to do. You'll want to look at a student's assessments and at their submissions, I should say, and carefully, and apply a rational grade. Or in the case of quizzes that are completely objective, where there are no subjective questions, no essay questions, no file upload questions, you want Canvas just to do the grading itself. And in the case of this syllabus quiz here, the syllabus quiz is a fully objective quiz. There are no subjective questions in it. So Canvas grades that for you and just drops the grade in the gradebook. And you don't have to worry about it. But what if you have a homework assignment? which generally Canvas can't grade. It can't evaluate a submitted assignment and provide a grade for it. For instance, here's an assignment called Define Screencasting that was in one of my modules in this course. If I can't remember exactly what that assessment was about, what that assignment was, I can always click on the link to it and I can go to the assignment page. And I see that this was a writing assignment. In your own words, define the term screencasting, list some applications for it, and list hardware and software requirements required. Please upload your answer as a Word document. That's a fairly simple but fairly typical homework assignment in Canvas. I'll get it out in a minute. The student then types up their answer to this and puts it in a Word document. And they submit that through the Dropbox that's associated with the assignment. I mean, we can take a quick look at that by going to the Home button. Go to Student View. Let's find that assignment in our modules here. There it is in the second module. Student can just click on it. And I can show you what the assignment, what the student sees when they submit the assignment by going to Resubmit Assignment. By the way, students can resubmit assignments as often as they like in Canvas, and you can't prevent them from doing that. You can decide which ones to grade, but you can't prevent them from putting in extra submissions. So since the student was told to upload a file, they have this File Upload tab. This is their Dropbox here. They just choose the file they want to upload, select it from files stored on their hard drive that they've created or on their phone. Students can submit assignments using the student app on their smartphone, either Android or even the iPhone now. They can do that. So students can pretty much take a Canvas course on an iPhone or an Android phone if they need to. But I'm not going to actually do this because I don't want to resubmit. But then the student would just would tell Canvas which file to submit and click Submit Assignment. Bam, it goes up. They get a receipt and you see it in the gradebook. I don't want to actually finish that, so I'll go back out. And let's go, and I'm in student view, so I'm going to see not the gradebook, but the student's view of the grades. So let's go back to your view of the gradebook. And here's that Define Screencasting assignment. Well, my test student has submitted that. So how do I grade that? Well, this little symbol here tells me that there's a submission waiting, but that it hasn't yet been graded. There'd be a number here if there were. So I can click on that icon, and rather than entering a grade manually, because I haven't even seen their submission yet, I can click the little right arrow here in the cell and go to the Speedgrader, which is the grading interface in Canvas. It's very similar to the one we had in Blackboard. It displays what the student has submitted. It gives me the option to just immediately enter a grade after reading this, presumably. Or in this case, I have created a rubric for the grading. The creation of the rubric is something we cover in our session on assessments, so I'm not going to talk about how you make rubrics right now, though it's not difficult. But if you've created a rubric, you can view that as you're grading, and you can see how you decided to, let me widen this just for a second so we can see a little more of this. You can decide when you create the rubric how many points to award for each criterion, grading criterion that you decided to use for this assessment. And if I want to go back and look at the assessment instructions to remind myself, define the term screencasting. That's one thing. List hardware and software requirements, another thing. And list some applications for it, third thing. So I have really 3 criteria the students have to satisfy here: the basic definition, the applications, and the requirements. Well, in my rubric, I have set up if I view the rubric, I've set up criteria for each of those. And I've said, well, the total point value for this is 10 points. So I'm going to give them 5 points for the definition, 2.5 points for the application, and 2.5 points for the requirements. And I can look at this, and the definition looks okay. There's really not a lot of applications or requirements mentioned, maybe a little bit on applications like a video tutorial. So maybe I can say the definition meets expectations. As far as applications go, maybe it's worth partial credit, maybe 1 point credit, but nothing there was no mention of requirements for creating a screencast. So I'm going to give them no points for that. So if you have this rubric set up and then save that, if you have the rubric set up in advance, you can just click, click, click and grade something. Not only is it so much faster than having to think your way through it from scratch, but it's also more consistent from student to student. So rubrics are really useful things when you're grading assignments or discussion forums, or when you're grading essay questions in tests. And you can set those up. And again, it's fairly simple to set them up. Once you decide, the tough part is deciding how you want to award grades for a particular assignment. Once you have that in your mind, setting up the rubric is fairly simple. And then it makes grading much faster and much more consistent, but you don't have to use a rubric by any means. Once you have decided by one means or another how many points the student should get for this assignment, you can then give feedback to the student. And you have marvelous feedback tools in Canvas. You can actually mark up the student's submission if it was submitted as a Word document. That's why I had them submit this. That's why I made this a requirement, to be submitted as a Word document. If you just let the students type their answer into a text box, you can't use this markup tool. So I can say screencasting is often done as a video tutorial. Maybe I want the students to tell me what they mean by video tutorial. I can highlight that and go to this highlight annotation here, and it will give me a little box I can type a comment into, like, what sort of tutorial? I can ask a question, or I can make a comment about a particular part of their answer. Like I can make a comment here, a full video recording. Actually, video and audio. Press enter. And the student will even have an opportunity later to reply to my comments. So you can get a conversation going here. But the markup tool is quite good. You can just type general comments. Faint praise where appropriate. But you can also upload a file as a comment. You might do that if you, let's say you had an extensive writing assignment and you really wanted to go over the paper with the student in much more detail than you can do here, and give them feedback that's much more detailed than is possible in this Speedgrader directly. You could do something like bring the student's paper up on the screen and record a screencast with Zoom or Snagit or Screencast-O-Matic as you're talking about the paper and highlighting sections of it, and indicating paragraphs and talking about this paragraph and that paragraph and the overall theme and the general level of the general compliance with grammar rules and things like that. You can get down to discussing individual commas and things like that in a screencast with great detail that would be equivalent to sitting down with the student in your office with the paper between you and you marking it up with a blue pencil while the student was watching. And if you create that screencast file, you can then upload it to the grading record, and the student can view it and get detailed, wonderful feedback from you, as good as anything they could get if they were meeting face-to-face, if you were meeting face-to-face with every student, which you'd never have the time or the logistical success to do. So that's an option. You can record a little chatty video, talking head video message that doesn't really bring up, you can't record a screencast here. You can't bring up the student's paper and talk about it with them, but you can give them some general comments by clicking on this little media comment button here. If you have a webcam on your computer and that webcam's not being used right now by Zoom, I happen to have a second webcam here I can use. All right. I might focus that or something if I if I really had to, but I'm not going to worry about it now. You can make sure that Zoom is hearing, or that Canvas is hearing you. You may have to change the microphone setting, but as long as you see this bar jumping across the screen, you know that your microphone is working and that Canvas is hearing you, and you can just start recording. Well, that wasn't a bad effort. You didn't completely answer satisfy the instructions of the assignment, but your definition was good, and you did mention at least one application of screencasting, but you didn't say anything about the requirements for making a screencast. So that's why you got a 6 out of 10. Finish and save. And within a short time, make sure I hit save, that video will be saved to the student's record on Canvas. This doesn't use up any of your file space in Canvas. Oh, you can preview it too. Well, that was there. Okay, finally finished saving it. That can take a moment if Canvas is busy. And when the student goes into their grades tool, they'll be able to play this back. And this is my favorite. This little icon down here in the lower right that says speech recognition. Looks like a little speaker. If you click on that, you can record a comment directly to text. That was fairly well done. I would have liked to have seen a lot more discussion of the requirements for screencasting. There it is. I could have even said period at the end of the line, end of the sentence and so on, and had it put the period in if I'd been thinking about that, but you get the idea. Again, this only works if you're using Chrome as the web browser, because it uses a Chrome plugin for speech recognition. that is integrated, automatically integrated there, or that Canvas integrates with automatically. And no, I don't know of any place else in Canvas you can use this right now. That's the question we usually get. So I submit then that comment, accept what the speech recognition gave me. I can edit it before submission if I wish, but I usually won't. And then I can submit the whole grading process to the gradebook. Make sure that went through. So now my test student, if I go back to the gradebook, this was the defined screencasting assignment. If I go back to the gradebook, my test student now has a grade of 6 for that. And all of those comments and everything is embedded, including the rubric explanation, showing what they got, how many points they got for each part of that, for each criterion in that question or in that assignment. All of that's in a stored in the system where the student can access it as well and see not only what grade they got, but why they got it. So that's the Speedgrader. You use the Speedgrader also, or this is a quiz. Yes. Mm-hmm.
You said it's stored in the system where? Where is the student information stored in the system?
In a dedicated storage area that you can't get to.
Well, how does the student see that?
The student sees that by going to, let's go to Student View. The student sees that by going to their Grades tool. And here's Define Screencasting. If they click on the link to that submission, they see all of the comments here. They can pull up their document that they submitted if they like. And it should, here's their media comment they can view. Or I'm sorry, they can make a media comment back to you. Here's the media comment you provided. I don't know why this is not bringing up their file, because that link just downloads the file, and they should be able to see those markup annotations that I made here, and that is not coming up right now. I suspect a performance issue right now. Shoot. But normally they would see that, the markup information here.
Can you go
well.
through that one more time, just a little bit slower, or where this, what the student would do?
The student would go to their Grades tool and
Okay.
find that grade. Click on the link to it. Let's see, they've got comments they can bring up right there. And there's their rubric feedback. Everything on this same line, or they can bring up and again, I should be seeing that their actual submission here, and I should be seeing the markups that I put in there, and I'm not sure why that's not happening. I'm gonna look into that. But here they can also see all the comments, and they can even return a media comment to you. Here I can show the rubric. There we go. There's the rubric. But I don't know why I'm not seeing this over here. Normally I do. So again, they go in through their own Grades tool, which is quite different, of course, than yours, because they're seeing only their grades and they're seeing them in a list. And the arrangement of the list is can be by assignment group, by due date, by module, or alphabetical by title. And they can print their grades. But all of this is under the student Grades tool. And there are all the possible grading, all the possible assessments. And here's their current overall course average. the running average. Not great. Need to suck it up a little bit on this one. And they see that here too. Did that answer your question? If I leave student view, of course, I go back to my view of the grades. You can also use the Speedgrader tool to grade essay questions in tests, much the same way you grade assignments, by just going into the Speedgrader the same way. Here, you see an actual copy of the student's test paper, quote unquote. So you see the exact feedback that the student got. All right, the student so far has a grade of 2 out of 10, but that's because much of the test is not graded, because question 3, which is the most valuable question, was an essay question. But so the student got one question, a 2-point question right, and a 1-point question wrong. It shows what they answered and what the correct answer was, in case you need to be reminded. And then it shows the answer that they made to the essay question, or the answer they typed in. You can't mark this up like you could a Word document, but you can read it. And you can make additional comments specifically about this question, or you can make comments about the test as a whole, if that's appropriate. Or you can just enter the grade here for this question 3, and that looks like a pretty good description of a flipped classroom, so I'm just going to give them full credit on that. Then I can update the score. So now the student's got an 8 out of 10. Notice I can't just type that in. I have to do that over here in the test itself. And I could override any of these question question awards that the system has made. Or if I thought that the answer to question 3 was an exceptionally good answer, I could even do something like give them an extra point of extra credit and raise the overall grade to 9. I get that question about tests sometimes. How could you give a student an extra credit on a test? You can also add what are called fudge points. If you've decided that you want to go through, for instance, and raise everybody's grade by a point, you can go through and add a fudge point to everybody's test grade, because maybe you made a mistake in a question, or a question was unnecessarily ambiguous or something, and you get some feedback from your students that just wasn't fair, and you decide to give them a little bit of break, you can throw fudge points in there. I think fudge points can also be negative when appropriate. And and that just raises or lowers the test grade appropriately, according to your evaluation, which is the only one that matters. You can, again, add comments in all the same way that we could with in an assignment. You just submit that grade, and now that student has, in the gradebook, has instead of having that, and this little icon takes us back to the gradebook, for that why screencasting quiz, instead of a little symbol there, they now have a number. So you've graded that one. This is a graded discussion. You can grade that using the Speedgrader as well. There are 3 students have submissions. Let's see, my test student's probably one of the most submissions, so let's look at that one. I can go to the Speedgrader as before. And this time the Speedgrader shows me all of the comments, or I'm sorry, all of the posts that student made in this discussion forum. This is a primary post. If I want to look back and see what this is about, I can go back to the actual item. And I asked them to post 3 ideas for instructional applications of Camtasia in your field. Replies and comments will be appreciated. In other words, they'll raise your grade. Or you can be more specific. Reply to two of your peers and ask a question about their post or make a comment about it. Something better than nice post would be appreciated. So here we have the discussion forum. So if I go back to the grade, to the Speedgrader, this is the initial post that this student made, and this was a post that the student made in reply to another student. And you, in addition to clicking here, you can also view this full discussion by clicking on this link if you need the context to make a value judgment on how good a job this student did in participating in this discussion. This looks like a pretty good effort. If I want to explain that grade some, I can type in or talk in comments, or even do it in video, just as I could with the assignment. And then I submit that grade. So that's how you use the Speedgrader to grade each of the types of assessments that Canvas allows: the homework assignment, the test, or the graded discussion. And you just work your way through the gradebook that way. You can just come back to the gradebook each time and click, there's the grade I gave for my test student. But if I were grading, if I had a whole column of those grades to do, instead of having to go back to the gradebook each time and pick a new one, I can just go from student to student using these arrows in the upper right hand corner. And let me move that out of the way a little bit there so that you can, if you're watching on a smartphone, you can see this. You can just go from student to student and very quickly grade your way down a column in the Speedgrader without having to keep jumping back to the gradebook, which will save you a ton of time. But if you want to grade assessments as they are submitted, you can just go in and look for the little submission symbol in the gradebook, or you can go to your to-do list on your home screen. And here will be some grades, some grading tasks that are waiting for you. You can go through them there. That's sort of equivalent to the needs grading list we had in Blackboard. Wow. A fairly significant amount of information in a 2-hour thereabouts period. I see I've got some good questions over here in the, and that's pretty much what I wanted to say about grading in Canvas. I'll take any questions you have about this or anything else for that matter. Now, let me go to the chat box first, though, and reward those folks who put their questions in there as I asked. We'll get those answered as quickly as possible. Some of them I think I already have, some of them I have not. So let me work my way down through. If I accidentally skip over your question, please let me know. Okay, here we've got a question about Zoom in Canvas. Well, let me try to find the ones having to do with grading first, and then I'll come back and get that one. Zoom. Is there a way for students to submit written assignments pre-COVID-19 to me electronically through Canvas, or is email our only alternative? Oh no, you can have them, you can just set up an assignment that I'm assuming these are assignments that you had assigned prior to the closing, but that you hadn't accepted yet. In that event, you just put that assignment, you just create an assignment in Canvas, preferably in a Canvas module, for that particular effort, that particular activity. Do new assignment, assignment name, pre-COVID writing assignment. Obviously, you would mention the actual nature of the assignment there. Add the item. Enter, click on the link to get to the assignment page for that assignment and edit it. And you'd provide some instructions here, maybe reminding the students, okay, this is the assignment I gave on the Wednesday before we were no longer able to meet. This was the nature of the assignment. This is what you were told to do in the course. Now I want you to be sure to type that assignment up in some electronic form, or perhaps write it out on paper and take a picture of it with your smartphone and send me the picture so I can view it. Assign a number of points for it. Make the submission online, either by direct text entry or more likely by file upload in this case, since they've presumably been working on it all along. Maybe they've written it out on a piece of paper, maybe they've typed it, maybe they've done it in a Word document, whatever, but somehow they can convert that assignment to a file, that assignment submission to a file, and then anything else you'd have to do? Nope. And then just save that assignment and set a due date at need and save it. And then the student would just go to Student View. I'm going to go to Student View to show that. And the student would then just go to either the Assignments tool or to the modules, find that assignment. Let's see, where did I put that one? Oh shoot, I didn't publish it. I always forget that. That's why you always check your modules, check everything in your course in Student View. You too can forget to publish something. It's not just my talent. That's it, I didn't publish it. Okay, now it's visible to the students. I can go back to Student View. I can go to the module, I can find that assignment, or I can go directly to the Assignments tool if you've given them access to that. We often don't. To make them find it in the module and make them find it in context. In this case, that really is not such a huge deal. I could just allow the student to go to the Assignments tool, and I could have that in an assignments group somewhere that it would make it easier to find. There's a pre-COVID writing assignment. That actually is an assignment, not a test. So I should put that down here. And the student would just click on it to access it. Oh, and I'm not the student right now, of course. Go back to Student View. Find the Assignments tool. Find that assignment. Canvas is getting a little deliberate at times. That's a little concerning. And then just submit the assignment. The student would submit assignment, would do a file upload, would choose the file to upload. The file would either be something like a Word document, or maybe just a picture of the assignment that they'd written out on paper. They'd find it, they'd open and submit. And now you have that assignment. you have a copy of that assignment that you can grade using the Speedgrader. You can give feedback to the student and all that.
They have the ability to upload multiple files into that one assignment.
Yes, when a
I
student
take a picture of a 6-page assignment, all 6 files.
right, if it's a multi-page assignment, they'd have to take multiple pictures.
Yeah. Okay.
And the student can choose a file to upload, but they can also add another file. And I don't think there's a limit to the number of files they can submit for one assignment.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question, because that might realistically be the case. So yes, your students, even your students without a computer or without, of course, your students almost certainly have a smartphone, and Microsoft Word for the smartphone is free. So a student can't really, unless they just have such an old smartphone that it really barely works anymore, or they don't have one at all, which is of course a possibility. But if they have a smartphone, they can type documents on the smartphone and submit them to Canvas using the Canvas Student app. And but you can choose to give them any the flexibility to do what any workaround that you're acceptable with, and allow them to upload the file. So it's
Thank you.
yes, you can do that. It may require a little ingenuity, but you can do that, and of course a lot of compassion. Because if we think we're freaked out about this, think about the students that get dropped in this pot like this. My heart goes out to them, and there's so many of them that we can't support them the way we can support you. Though, thank gosh, they have the student Canvas hotline number that they can call. Though they're going to have waits to get through on that as well. It's just not an ideal situation. Also interested in captioning possibility, as I teach ESL and they need the extra info to support understanding. Grace, are you talking about captioning in Zoom or captioning in Canvas? Not hearing Grace there. I'm guessing that's a question about videos and Zoom recordings and videos uploaded to Canvas. Let me deal with that one after I deal with the issues of dealing with grading. They can upload. I believe that's an answer to that question I just answered as well. That's great. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Okay. How to add past assignments prior to online. We talked about making manual columns and manually entering the grades. Dave, using your grade system for letter grades, will A's, for example, be equal, or is there a way to have them connect to different values, say for quizzes and assignments? Well, normally you enter grades for quizzes and assignments in point values. The letter grade, you can have the letter grade, the grade displayed as a letter grade, if it falls within the cutoff values that the student that you have set in your grading scheme. You can have a grade for a particular assessment displayed as letter grades, but behind that is the actual number of points that the student earns, and Canvas will use those actual number of points in the grade computation rather than just some nominal value for an A. So if a student got a 91% grade on the assignment, and you display that grade as an A in the grade column, it's the 91 that will actually get thrown into the computation, not some mid-range A like a 95 or something like that. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay, somebody's asking for a step-by-step tutorial on how we make a quiz and have it show up on the gradebook. That's something I did in the overview in Canvas this morning. I'm trying to think if I have a tutorial that does that specifically. And I don't. That is, in fact, the one that is at the top of my list of tutorials to make. So I will work on that and work on getting it to you. See, do I first go into assignments and then write exam 1 and then make the exam, calling it exam 1, and somewhere it shows up as a column in grades? Is there somewhere step by step on how to do this without all the pictures? Well, typically most of those guides have pictures in there as well. But Linda, I am going to work on that very tutorial. That is literally the next one that's on my list. I'm trying to develop a series of very basic Canvas tutorials in between all of the other things that we've been doing here. But first, let me show you how to find that information online. I think we can probably find something very close to what you're asking for by going to Google and typing, how do I create a test in Canvas? And here's a step-by-step list of instructions just as you requested. I don't know if that's going to be sufficient or not, because it's kind of just hitting the high spots. Here's apparently more detail from University, I think that's University of South Florida, as a matter of fact, College of Nursing. So here they take you through it step by step, but with the pictures. There is a Canvas guide on how to do this as well. That's matching. I don't. Let's go to the Canvas guides as well. Get back into Canvas, go to Help, and search the Canvas guides. Oops, I'm still my test student here. Don't want to. I need to be me. There we go. And we'll go to the Canvas guides. Go to, again, to the Canvas guides. Go to the instructor guides. Go to quizzes. All tests are quizzes to Canvas. Quizzes. You don't want new quizzes. That's the new quizzing tool. It is a nightmare and it's not ready for prime time yet. So quizzes. How do I create a quiz with individual questions? That's the basic thing. And here, this will take you through it. Again, it's got pictures. But it will show you just exactly what the screens look like and so on. And that's basically what I did this morning, only I showed it dynamically. But I am going to make a tutorial for that, and I'll get it out as quickly as I possibly can, because you're not the first person to ask for that, or the first person to suggest that it was a good idea to have it. Ready, let me show you where to find those tutorials when I create them. You go to our open on-demand video site at SDCCD. The URL is sdccdolvid.org. Let me show that bigger here so you can actually see that on a small screen. That's it right there, sdccdolvid.org. I can copy that and put that into our chat tool. online, oop, there's an O there, online tutorial site. There's the link. I just put that at the bottom of the chat tool. Remember, you can save that chat log. But I will put that in. All you'll have to do is type Canvas to get our in the search box. Bring up our Canvas tutorials, and it will be right up here. And these are just listed by the order they were posted. So it'll be right up here at the top somewhere on how to create a test in Canvas. Step by step basic. Again, basically what I did in my explanation in all of our, every one of our recent Canvas overviews, I've done that. So you can go to the workshop archives here. And if you haven't had a chance to attend one of those meetings, you can do you can look at an overview of Canvas. There's several of them there that will take you through that and a lot of other things, basic information about Canvas. But I know you would much rather have like a 5-minute tutorial that would take you right through it, that didn't that you didn't have to search around for that information. So I'm working on that. Alrighty. I'm going back up in the chat tool here. Can I open a quiz for just one student to retake if I feel an exception is warranted to the due date and time? Sure can. You can go, and you can do it very quickly and easily. Let's go back into Canvas. Figure out what I did with that. There it is. You can, yeah, I'm me here. You can go into the quiz that you wish to give an extra chance to a student for. And as long as the quiz is published, you can go to moderate this quiz. And you can allow that student, oops, uh-oh, I allowed this quiz, I allowed unlimited attempts on this quiz. Let me change that so I can make this point here. Sure did, there it is, multiple attempts, no limit. So let me take that off and save the result. And now go back to moderate this quiz. And I can click here to add an exception to this. And I can give a number of extra attempts, or I can just manually unlock the quiz right away for the student. Either one will work, and save it. And now that student can take the quiz again. And that will happen. I entered grades for all students, but one student is telling me she can't see grades for exam 1, but I can see them for all the other exams. So the student's telling you, you see this, Linda, I assume you're telling me that you're seeing the student's grade in the grade book, but the student is telling you she can't see it in her grade display. And it's difficult for you to evaluate that. But if you get into a situation, as you have, into a situation like that with a student, if you send me an email, I can log in as the student. Canvas gives an administrator the capability to act as a different user. I can go in and I can look and see what the student is actually seeing in their grading tool, in their grades tool. And I can verify whether that's correct or not, or if the student is just not looking in the right place. So if you'll email me that, I'll the particulars on that, the name of the student and the CRN of the course, I'll go in and take a look. And when the name of the quiz that they claim they can't see the grade for, and I will go in and look. Can you track students' in-person class hours? Well, I think you're talking about on Zoom.
I was talking about on actual Canvas because our
Oh,
program.
on Canvas. Oh, in other words, how much time they spent on Canvas and how much work they did?
No. So for our program, we have to have logged hours that they're in class and logged hours that they're in clinical sites for the
Right.
CNAs. So we have to submit that. And I want to see if there's a function that Canvas can do that.
Yeah, well, Canvas can tell you how long a student spent in Canvas over a period of time. Is that the sort of thing you need?
Does it show it day by day, or is it just a cumulative?
It will actually show it session by session.
Okay, that might work.
You might, yeah, you're not, since there isn't really a class period per se, you can't report attendance by class period in an online course. And I presume somebody somewhere is going to have to make some sort of accommodation for that in the reporting requirements. But let me show you what you can see for an individual student and see if that will help. And this is related to grades, absolutely. If you go to your people tool, your roster tool in Canvas, and you pick out a particular student, you can click on that student's name. And you can get all sorts of analytics about that student, but if you really want to drill down and see exactly what that student did when in Canvas and how long they spent at it, you can click on the student's name up here, and you'll bring up a student access report page. You can see what the students enrolled in of your courses. But you can also get an actual access report here. And you can see when they viewed something, you can see how many times they participated and when they did it. So that can give you an idea. It doesn't give you actual time online in Canvas, unfortunately. That's just not something that's germane to an online class in most cases. I don't know of another way to do that. There is an attendance tool in Canvas, but it's really meant for an in-class type course where you're just using Canvas as a supplement, where you do have defined class periods. But Canvas is not really designed to work in that environment. It's an online course delivery system as opposed to one that delivers actual elapsed times. Let me look at a course, a little more data here. Maybe we can see a little more about that. Let me go to this one that I've had around for a while. Go to people, test one students, go in, do the access report. No, the same basic data. So you can see when they last looked at something, and you can see how many times they looked at it, but it doesn't tell you how long they sat there and looked at it. And it doesn't tell you how much time it took them to submit an assignment. You can tell how long it took a student to take a test, but that's really doesn't sound like that's adequate for what you need. So I don't know if Canvas is really going to be able to help you with that or not. Let me do a little thinking, a little research on that, because I understand the situation you're in, I think.
Yeah, I appreciate you
And,
looking.
I'd like to be able to help, but I'm not sure that Canvas can really help you, because online courses are all about not how much time students have their butts in a seat, but what they accomplish, what they get done. And I understand that doesn't help when you have to report butts in seats. And when there are no longer any seats, how do you deal with that? You may have to get some guidance from the folks to whom you have to report. Okay, we're online now. How do we handle this? Well, we never thought about doing this online. You know, we never dreamed this would happen. So there are going to have to be some accommodations made, I think. And I empathize. I will think of that. Can you display both a letter grade and percentage grade? Yes, in the total column in the grade book. Can you mark up a PDF or a JPEG file? You can mark up a PDF. You can't mark up I don't think you can mark up a JPEG. I'm giving math tests where I grade their process, not necessarily the correct answer. Trust me, I understand. I taught general chemistry for many years, which is more mathematics than it is chemistry. And I understand exactly what you're saying. So I want to circle an error and make a comment. Can I do this for a PDF or a JPEG? You can, I'm pretty sure you can do it for a PDF. Don't think you can do it for a JPEG, but in either case, I can tell you what would be an easier way to do that, or a more effective way to do that. Rather than using the Speedgrader tool, I would think that using a screencasting tool like Screencast-O-Matic or Snagit or Camtasia, if your pockets are deep, and pulling up the image that you were sent by the student on the screen, you can, in those tools, you can annotate that image in real time, or you can pull it up. You can do this in Zoom. You could start a Zoom session without anybody else in it and bring the student's submission up on your screen and share that screen, and then use the annotation tools in Zoom to mark up the image on the screen, you know, to mark over it, to draw circles and arrows and stuff, and talk about what you're putting in there, and even probably record yourself working out part of the problem yourself on a document camera, if you have one of those, to show the student, well, this is what you needed to do at this point, and write, or just type that right over the type text, or draw characters right over that using the annotation tools in Zoom, and then upload that recording either to the Zoom cloud or to YouTube and share it with the student in the Speedgrader using that file attachment tool in the Speedgrader, where you could let's see, find go to grades. Pull up a submission here. Go to the Speedgrader. Under comments, under your comments options over here, you have a little file upload button. You could upload that screencast file, presumably it'd be a short one, right into Canvas. And the student would then be able to play that back and see your markup and your description of the process that they've done. That, I realize that's a very heavily conceptualized, kind of vague process. I'd be happy to show you how that could work. We'd have to do an individual Zoom session. And I think I'm about to get off of this daily drumbeat of 2 sessions a day of these courses. So I can carve out some time that we could get into Zoom together, and I could show you how to do that in Zoom and show you the kinds of things you could do and what you need to do that. And because I really feel for this, because this is exactly the kind of problem I would have if I were trying to teach chemistry in this environment. So I'd really love to work with you on that. I'm just trying to give you a rough idea, and you know, if you're getting a general idea of what I'm saying here, maybe and you have a little experience with Zoom, you could maybe try that and play with it.
Okay, I'm going to give it a try this weekend, and you'll hear me yelling from San Diego to wherever you are.
I do, and I do understand, though I'm a good ways away. I'm almost in Canada.
Don't worry. Okay,
But,
thank you.
And I will be, this weekend, I'll be online with some general Q&A sessions on Saturday morning, I think it's from 9:30 to noon, and Sunday afternoon from 1:30 to 4:30 nominally, though I let the sessions run as long as people have questions. And maybe we could do that there.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I'll look for that.
I want to help. And this one, that's a fascinating question. Obviously, it really spoke to me. Can you repeat where you clicked on to get the video comment? I just didn't see it. You bet. I happen to be right there now. It's at the bottom of the right of the Speedgrader interface here. And it looks like, and I know that's a little faint. If you're on a phone, that's going to be hard to see, though you can pinch zoom the phone. It looks like a little TV screen with a right pointing triangle, a play button in the middle of it. And if you mouse over it, it says media, the tooltip says media comment. And that's where you go to record those talking head video comments. In providing student feedback, they're kind of limited. Because you can't show a student what you're talking about. You can just give them some general advice. But it is engaging, so it's nice, and it's quick. It's just as effective as a typed comment, and all you have to do is speak, and they can see you while you're talking, so they can sense your mood and your seriousness or lack thereof by your nonverbal communication. And remember, 70% of communication is nonverbal, so this is worth doing. You do have to be careful not to use this tool with a student who is hearing impaired, because getting these captioned is possible but exceptionally tedious. Do you have to go through each student's grade to add fudge points, or can you add it across all students? I believe you have to add it student by student. Anthony. Okay, got a Zoom question there. I'll come back through and get those in a minute. Please show again how to get to the location where I can drop the lowest score. Will do. If you have set up assignment groups, let me get back to the course here. I'm in the Speedgrader. If you have set up assignment groups in the Assignments tool, as I described earlier, and those groups are, well, if you have them set up, you can just go to the top of the assignment group where the name is showing and go straight out to the right, and you'll see a context menu item just to the right of the little plus sign that allows you to add something to this assignment group, the 3 vertical dots, and you can select Edit from the menu that pops up. And this is where you can set the number of lowest or highest scores to drop within that assignment group. So, hope that helped.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. How do you grade multiple choice questions? I got good news for you. You don't have to. When you create a multiple choice question, you tell Canvas which option is the right answer. And Canvas grades it for you. So you don't have to do that. No more Scantron sheets, no more test keys laid over answer sheets, no more going through the test paper and making check marks. Canvas does that for you. And it'll do it for all objective question types, including multiple choice, matching, true, false, fill in the blank, fill in multiple blanks, multiple drop downs, and a couple more that escape my memory at the moment. My memory is very escapable these days. Great questions. Okay, I had some questions that dealt with Zoom back up here. Let me go deal with those. Have I got anybody still with me? Yes, 6 of you still here. So hopefully these are your questions that I'm about to get to. Was a question about whether I'd seen my email today. Not since about 9 o'clock this morning. I've been online in Zoom almost continuously, or eating lunch since then. Sorry about that. Okay, here's a Zoom question. I set up the link in my Canvas shell for my personal meeting room. I also set up meetings. What I discovered is that I had also used the link in my Canvas shell. When I tried to use the meeting link I had set up, we were in 2 different meetings. Weird. This is for later, I realize. Okay. Actually, no, I can deal with that right now, Elizabeth, if you're here. If not, let me kind of paraphrase this as well. The number one crash landing with Zoom, the only way really I've ever seen Zoom fail, is a situation where the instructor ends up in one meeting room and the students end up in another. There's a way you can absolutely prevent that from happening, and that involves using your personal meeting room that you get with each Zoom account exclusively. Let me go into Zoom to show you what I mean. That's not where I want to be. That's more like it. Let me sign in with my Confer Zoom credentials that I was provided with by Confer Zoom. This is a Confer Zoom account, but I can manage it just at the regular Zoom website at zoom.us. Confer Zoom accounts are just Zoom accounts paid for by the State Chancellor's Office. So I go into my Zoom account screens, and on the meetings page, which is usually where you get dropped, there's a link to your personal meeting room. This is a Zoom meeting room whose access information never changes. And if you use this exclusively, you and your students will never end up in different meetings. You can provide your students access to this personal meeting room either by giving them the meeting ID, which they can then enter when prompted for a meeting ID when they try to join a Zoom meeting, either through the Zoom website or through the app on their phones or tablets. Or you can send them a link to send them your so-called join URL, which never changes. That's how you got into this session. In all probability, Mary sent you an email that had my join URL in it, and you just clicked on that, and it dropped you right in to my personal meeting room. And I came into my personal meeting room, and we were all there together, and nobody was sitting out in another meeting room somewhere. But there are so many ways to start a Zoom meeting that it's possible for you to start a Zoom meeting, especially if you're not real familiar with Zoom. It's possible for you to start a Zoom meeting in a meeting room other than the one that your students are going to end up in. So what you can do to make that very unlikely to impossible is to go to Settings in your Zoom configuration screens and scroll down just a little ways in the setting. There's a huge long roll of toilet paper of settings here, but the ones you want for this are right near the top, and they say use personal meeting ID when scheduling a meeting, use personal meeting ID when starting an instant meeting. That covers all of the various ways you might start a Zoom meeting. If you turn those two on, and they're not on by default, if you turn those two on, then you do that just by clicking here and turning it on. When it's blue, it's on. Once you do that, no matter how you start the meeting, the Zoom meeting, if you have sent your students, I'll go to the profile here. If you have sent your students your personal meeting link or your personal meeting ID, and maybe you've put this in a link in Canvas.
Yes, I did that. Yeah,
okay,
that's
good. Okay, great. So if they've got that link and you have your settings set so that no matter how you start that Zoom meeting, you're going to be using your personal Zoom meeting room, you will end up in the same place. I guarantee it.
Okay, yeah, because I don't know what I did, but I somehow managed not to
trust
do
me,
it.
it's happened. I understand it. When I early on with Zoom, it happened to me more than once. It's the #1 failure, point of failure for Zoom. Almost the only one.
So when I set up,
happen.
I set up meetings, according to time and recurring meetings. So now, as long as those two buttons are clicked, I can I can either click on start meeting or I can click on host meeting. Either one will get me to the same place.
Correct. As long as those two options are set, Zoom is always going to use your personal meeting room.
Oh, that's so fantastic. Okay, thank you.
Now, the one thing I'm not absolutely certain about is if a meeting has already been scheduled.
Right.
I think this will apply, but I'm not absolutely certain. So just to be on the safe side, you might delete and reschedule those meetings at the same times or something like that after you change those. Or you could just try one of them and see what happens.
Yeah, I think I tried one, and that's what got me in trouble. So maybe I didn't have those buttons clicked when I set the meetings up.
Probably not, because that's not the default.
Okay, that must be it. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, you might just kill those scheduled meetings and reschedule them after you change the settings.
Cameras at the same time.
And after that, I guarantee you and your students will end up in the same place.
Yeah, I kind of got there by just messing around, but I wasn't. It was hard to follow my protocol at that point, but we did.
Trust me, I understand. That happens to me at some point in almost every Zoom meeting I've ever done. And you have to start scrambling. But hey, that happens in the classroom too, right? That's not a measure of the technology. That's more a measure of just the second law of thermodynamics, that the entropy of the universe tends toward a maximum. So, or sort of a statement of Murphy's law as well.
Well, I found what gave me a great deal of grace was I brought my African gray parrot over once I got on, and everybody likes the parrot so much.
I love it. Sometimes I'll pick up my little dog and try to charm people with that. Yeah, I agree. Anything that works.
Bring your parrot to Zoom.
Right. Let's see, Elizabeth, you also asked about captioning in Zoom, the lectures in Zoom. Are you talking about live captioning or captioning the recordings?
Well, the live captioning, didn't you tell us we had to send something to Zoom and they could maybe do it?
You send it to confer Zoom, yeah, to CCC Confer with 5 days notice, and maybe they can do it. But you realize how many Zoom meetings are going on right now.
That's never going to happen, yeah.
And that, yeah, I suspect, I don't have any hard data on that. I just have my concerns. And I will tell you that, yes, you definitely want to accommodate your hearing impaired students in any way, but they can watch the recordings. And there was a statement yesterday from the Federal Department of Education saying that nothing in federal disability regulations is to be used to prevent you from being able to provide emergency education to your students during this crisis. So basically, the Office of Civil Rights is not going to be enforcing this stuff right now, much at all.
On the,
But yes.
oh, I'm sorry. So when you make the recording, just real quick,
Hmm?
can you tell me, is that in settings where you set it so students everybody can record it? Was it a settings thing? For
I don't
session?
think you can give everyone the right to record automatically. Let me see.
Oh.
Let's take a quick look at that. That doesn't sound right, but let's see. Go to settings, recording. Okay, hosts can give permit. Here's the setting that says hosts can give participants the permission to record locally.
Okay.
But that's one by one.
Right. Okay.
You'd have to give them permissions one by automatically. You can have the recording mission recorded, or the session recorded automatically. No, there doesn't seem to be any option to allow everyone to record anytime they want.
Okay.
So you have to grant that permission individually.
So I just click on record when I start a meeting if I didn't preset that, and then the thing just records and it saves on my hard drive.
Well, when you click on the record button, you get an option to record either to the local computer or to the cloud.
Okay.
If you record to the cloud, it goes up to the Zoom cloud, and it is made available to your students. You can put a link to it in your in a Canvas page or in a Canvas module, and they can just play it. It's captioned pretty well, and the interface is pretty good. I just have some concerns about the viability of the Zoom cloud moving forward. Right. You can also record to the local computer and upload the video manually to YouTube, which takes no time at all.
Oh, okay.
But and then I'm pretty sure YouTube's going to be there throughout this crisis. Indeed, if Google and YouTube go down, well, the rapture has come, the graveyards are emptying, and it's all over anyway. So we'll have other things to worry about. But I'm not so sanguine about the Zoom cloud. So I don't like to upload stuff I create to a cloud I don't control. I have pretty good control over my videos at YouTube, and Google, it's not in Google's interest to give anybody access to my videos that I don't allow. And I can always get my videos back from YouTube. So I'm just more comfortable using YouTube. I trust Google more than I trust anybody else in that regard. But that's just me.
So are we going to be like at risk if I did have a student say an extraordinarily off-color thing. I don't know if he knew his audio was on.
Yeah, there's nothing more dangerous than an unloaded gun or a dead mic. Yeah, I know the feeling. Or so would you be at risk from that?
Well, I was just, because if I give out my personal waiting room or whatever they call it, right, then presumably anybody else can look at my stuff, right?
Well, they can join the meeting if they have that link from an earlier event or something. Yeah, that's one small issue. I've never had that be a problem, but it's theoretically possible that somebody could get in there and hear something that you wouldn't want to be heard. But I mean, these things happen in the classroom too, and that's clearly not something you have any control over.
Yeah.
The recording is maybe another matter. If you put a recording up that has something like that in it, the argument could be made that you should have known that that was in there and you shouldn't have put that up. But the only way to avoid that would be to edit the recording, which in order to do that, you'd have to have the video file. So you'd either have to record to the local computer or you'd have to download the video file from the Zoom cloud. and then edit it. And that, of course, requires a video editor, piece of video editor software and some familiarity with it. So unless it were exceptionally egregious, I don't think I'd worry. If you get into a situation where you just absolutely can't, you know, I'm not going to put this online with that in it. I can, if you can get the video file either by downloading it from the Zoom cloud or just if you have it on your local computer, I can give you a place where you can upload it, and you can tell me, you know, roughly what timestamp that is. Like it was 3.5 minutes in or something like that, and I can cut that out for you and send you the file back.
Oh, great.
I wouldn't imagine that would happen very often, so I'd be happy to, in the unlikely event it occurred, I'd be happy to help out with that.
Yeah, thankfully the one I did, I don't think I remembered to hit the record button. So
welcome to the club.
Yeah, lucky me.
Serendipity. Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the advantages to just having the recording start automatically. But you know, I like to say things at the beginning of the meeting and so on that really don't need. I don't want people to have to go to listen to that. It's not that there's anything I don't want them to hear. It's just that I hate to subject them to that, to our little conversations at the beginning. And to get that out, I'd have to edit every recording before I put it up, and I just don't generally have time to do that right now. So I do turn on the recording manually, and sometimes I forget, and I just have to wait till the next time I do that seminar to record it. And I don't have a real good solution to that, obviously. Okay, let's see. Did we have anything else in here about Zoom? I think we did that. Captioning. Let's see. Someone was interested in the live captioning possibility and for ESL students, and I can see why that would be a real help for ESL students if you had a live captioner in your Zoom meeting. And that you can request. I don't think that's either of you who are still in the class, but that is something that can be requested through, though Confer Zoom has kind of buried that link on their webpage, so that makes me wonder a little bit too about the viability of this option. But if you go to Confer Zoom, actually I think I had to search for it on Google to find it. I said live recording Confer Zoom, not live recording, live captioning. Confer Zoom, requesting live captioning for Confer Zoom. I'm not even sure how you get to this in their page. So here's the page. I'll put that in the chat tool in case anybody comes back and sees this later.
Okay.
Live captioning request Confer Zoom. Okay, and good luck to you. I wouldn't really count on that at this point in time if it were me. Let's see, anything else? Do either of you have anything else?
You've been so generous. Could you do a real quick on the IPV camera?
IPVO?
Yeah, my husband got one, but we
Look
struggled
at
to
you!
figure out how to go back and forth between Zoom and the camera.
Basically, that's right. You just share your screen in Zoom, which I'm doing. Okay, so you're comfortable with screen sharing, right?
Yep.
There is, with that camera, there should be a piece of software that allows you to throw what the camera is seeing up on the computer screen. If you got that camera, depending on how you got that camera, it should have come on a CD that came with the camera. Though that model you've got is the same one I'm still using, and that one hasn't been available for about 2 or 3 years at least.
Okay.
So do you have the visualizer software that comes with the camera?
Yes, I downloaded it from the App Store. I'm the tech support in the family.
I hear you. Well, downloaded it from the, when you say App Store, you're not talking about a mobile device, right? You're talking about an app for the computer.
Right. It's the camera works when we open. It's not Presenter. That's the old version. It's Visualizer.
Visualizer.
Oh, good. Visualizer,
Good.
The camera works.
So you have this. Here's the. Let me stop it because it's been going too long, and start it again. You have this application then, IPvo Visualizer. If you look down in my
correct.
Menu. Good.
Correct.
Oh, you're home free.
Now
you say that works for you, right? There's the parrot.
Sorry about that.
Not at all, trust me. Though I will tell you that I do have some PTSD on with parrots, because one of the first dentists I ever went to kept parrots in his office, in his near his waiting room, and I could, every time you could hear them vocalizing like that while you were waiting for the dentist. It still takes me back to that a little bit. Okay, but that's neither there. Wonderful critters. So the visualizer software works. You just start it up, and you get that image on your screen, right? And
yes.
you can adjust things accordingly, and invert the image and switch and mirror it automatically here, so that what's written on the paper, this is a simple lens, so it doesn't automatically erect the image. So you have to use the software to do that. But if you can bring that up on the screen, all you have to do is share your screen in Zoom. And you're seeing the image from my camera right now, right?
Yeah.
So that's all it takes. You can, of course, make this bigger so that people can see it better. I don't recommend maximizing it because it can cover up other stuff you need, but you can make it as big as you can. And of course, you have the option to zoom in as well, and so on in the visualizer software. But now you're sharing this with your students. And you can write on the piece of paper, the legal pad or whatever. Draw math symbols, draw pictures, whatever you normally do on a whiteboard. Only it's easier to write on a piece of paper than it is to write on a whiteboard on the wall. And share that with your students. And when you're done with this, you don't even have to close the software. You can just minimize it, and now you're sharing your computer screen again. So it's just a matter of minimizing and remaximizing your IPvo visualizer software. That sometimes when you do that, you do have to refocus the camera. There's a little focus button right in the middle of the camera vertically. You can punch that, or you can do it through the software. Though I have noticed sometimes with this old camera, when I use the focus command, focus button on the software, sometimes the software crashes.
Yep.
So I tend to use the manual focus button on the camera. But other than that, that's all there is to it. You just start the visualizer software, share your Zoom screen, and share the camera image with your students. And then when you're done with it, you minimize it until you need it again later, and you bring it back up. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. What we experienced, though, was when Elizabeth was trying to present in Zoom, her computer was using its internal camera, and then the Zoom or the IPVO camera wasn't active. There didn't seem, I couldn't identify a way to make both cameras active at the same time.
Well, you don't necessarily need the IPVO camera to be active as a Zoom camera. You
Right.
just need to communicate with the visualizer software,
Right.
which you can bring up on your screen. So that's
Right.
not happening really through Zoom, except in the sense that Zoom is sharing what's on your screen with the world, with the meeting.
Right.
But
Elizabeth wants to, sort of talk to her students and sort of be the lecturer through her through her computer's camera. Then the IPVO camera doesn't seem to be active, so it seems to be one or the other.
Well, when she's sharing her screen, the students at best see a little video thumbnail of her.
Right.
They can't see her full screen and the screen share full screen at the same time.
So yeah, see, we're seeing him and we're seeing the IPVO image, so that's good. That's all we need.
That's what you want, right?
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
The confusion that can arise is that IPVO camera is basically a webcam.
Right.
So you can use it as the primary as the camera that Zoom is using when you're not sharing your screen as well, and that can be confusing. If you go to the video settings menu in Zoom as the host, which is the little up caret to the right, a little camera icon in the Zoom menu at the bottom of the screen, you can select between multiple cameras to use for your primary camera in Zoom. And the IPVO will appear in that list. And you can use it instead of a webcam. It is, in effect, a webcam. It's just it's a webcam that's optimized to show still or barely moving images as opposed to something just showing a person. But I can kill my share here, and I can swap to the IPVO camera. And there it is. But the problem with doing that is that you can't invert the image.
Oh, so you have to write upside down.
So you can't really use it. Yeah, everybody's got to stand on their heads. It just doesn't work that well. If you just want to use it as a webcam, though, it works reasonably well, especially if you pop the resolution up a bit. Actually, I can't do that. I can't do that without the visualizer software. So you could use that as a webcam in a pinch too. When I'm demonstrating in the middle of a Zoom session about Canvas, when I'm demonstrating the little Canvas ad hoc video recorder that you find in several places in Canvas, I have to use this camera because my good camera, my Logitech webcam, is being used by Zoom. And a webcam can't be used by two applications at the same time.
Makes sense.
So, but you can have, this does bring up the point that you can have multiple cameras attached to your computer and use them alternately in Zoom. So I could have this webcam pointed at something else, like a, I don't know, some three-dimensional object I was trying to view. And I could just yada, 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 and then I could switch my camera to the IPVO and show like a three-dimensional object or something.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, just a headset. And you can go back and forth. So if you're looking at doing a fairly complex presentation, or maybe you have a poster up on an easel, or maybe you have a camera pointed outside or something like that, and you want to show people something, or you have a flip chart or something that you can use. You could put another camera on that and one on you and switch back and forth between them using that video settings menu in Zoom. And I've done that before. I've recorded live events that way. It's sort of a bargain base. That makes Zoom into a sort of a bargain basement video studio. And I've got a couple of more than a couple of tutorials online where we had live speakers come in, and the speaker was showing PowerPoint presentations and all that and so on. We fed the video through different cameras and switched between them while he was talking and all that, and that's kind of fun to do. Zoom has just some awesome capabilities if you really get down into the weeds with it, and it's my absolute, at this point in time, it is my absolute favorite instructional technology tool of all the ones I've played with over the years. You can do more with it, and it's so versatile. If you only had one tool, this is one to have, because you can do live meetings, you can do screencasting, you can do video, pretty sophisticated video production with it, all for $15 for what it costs you to subscribe to HBO. And we're lucky enough we don't even have to pay that because the state chancellor's office is paying it. They got a deal. So I love it.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it so far. I haven't gotten all my students on, and I wanted to ask you that. If they're on a mobile phone, can they click that link to my personal waiting room and still get the same results?
Yes.
Okay.
As long as they have the Zoom app already loaded on their device. Yes. Works like a shot.
Okay, so there's really no reason for the most part why they can't get to the Zoom session then.
Not if they've got a smartphone or a computer or a tablet.
Yeah, because they do have low-cost phone plans now for people, and I know I sent all my students all the information about all the low-cost stuff. So
good. Also, if they're in a Wi-Fi cloud, they're not using any of their cellular data. And I know a lot of libraries, for instance, now and other public businesses that have Wi-Fi inside that are closed down are leaving it on, and the Wi-Fi tends to bleed out a little bit past the walls of the building. So you'll find people parked all around the building using the Wi-Fi, the free Wi-Fi from inside, and many businesses are leaving that, and libraries are leaving that on so people can do that. And I remember the days when that was the only way I could get Wi-Fi, and you would drive around until you pulled up your phone and see if you got a Wi-Fi, or you had your laptop beside you, and you'd be looking for a Wi-Fi signal that wasn't password protected. And sit there and we used to call that war driving.
Yeah, I've done that. I always felt a little guilty, but
yeah. It's ethically it's a little off, but not right now, by God. And people are leaving their Wi-Fi, their public Wi-Fi on, so that people can do that. The patrons can do that without risking themselves by getting out of their cars or something like that.
Oh, that's good to know. So I can tell my students if they say they're having trouble with it.
Something to try. And that doesn't use up any of their cellular data, so it won't run up their cell phone bill. But some data plans are so restrictive that a Zoom meeting runs about a megabyte a minute.
Oh, wow.
An hour meeting is 60 megabytes. That's not a huge amount of data, but on a restrictive data plan, that can add up.
So do you think, so I have classes that meet twice a week. So what I told them was that the first day we met on Zoom would be kind of like the lecture, PowerPoint, ask questions thing. And then the second class meeting, I set up different things, discussion, reading response assignments. And so The second
Right,
class
right.
meeting, I was gonna, and that's how I did it this week so far, is the second meeting is, okay, let's talk about your assignment. And then if I have to give them context for the reading or something,
Mhm.
do you think that's overload, or do you think that's okay?
That
Because
sounds very reasonable to me, like a good plan.
they're live, because it's replacing face to face. So, because that's kind of what I told them. I said, well, you guys would be in class live, and it's actually shorter because I'm not going to do it usually for the full class meeting
Right.
on Zoom. So,
Yeah, I think a lot of people are doing that basic thing. They're just continuing as they were operating before by using Zoom instead of the classroom, and then supplementing that with material loaded on the Canvas.
yeah, and I really like, I mean, I have to say, I was one of those face-to-face teachers that said, I'm never going online because I really like the class interaction, but I think this is about as good as you can get for that.
I think so. I think this is the best way to do online education, as a matter of fact, is a combination of real-time interaction, whether it be lectures or discussion or whatever, combined with the asynchronous um, activity and resources in Canvas. And generally, when we first started distance education or technology-based distance education back in the 1980s, it was like this. It was live lectures or live interactions over a very expensive and very cranky video conferencing system that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and students had to go, maybe they didn't have to travel all the way to your classroom, but they had to travel to a satellite site somewhere that had all of the equipment and so on, because it was at least $100,000 to set up a room to do that.
Wow.
And the technology was cranky and it didn't work sometimes, and it gave everybody such a bad taste about this technology-based distance education, that when the opportunity to put classes online through a learning management system came along, everybody just hopped on that, because you didn't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to set up multiple sites around the countryside. You just had a piece of software running on a server, and it was totally asynchronous, so students loved it. They could do it on their own time, and faculty could do it on their own time too. So that became the norm, and this synchronous interaction just about died out, or became a very tiny part of the overall effort. And then things like Zoom came along that made the synchronous part easy and cheap, where it never, and reliable, where it never was before. And we started to see that become a more and more important part of distance education again. And now we're seeing widespread adoption of that paradigm, where you mix synchronous with asynchronous and so on, because people who are suddenly tossed into this can't be expected to learn all the nuances of setting up an asynchronous online course on Canvas in 2 weeks. I'm sorry, that's totally unreasonable. So you give the lifeline of being able to continue pretty much the way you were by lecturing, but then adding in a little bit of time, adding in the asynchronous part of the puzzle through Canvas. And actually, in the long run, I think this is probably going to improve distance education quite a bit. Because
Yeah,
I agree with you. I don't like asynchronous distance education. I like doing this.
yeah, because Charlie wants to join in too, huh?
Yeah, Charlie.
It was really funny. One of my students was chatting with me, and he really got into it, and he like went right up next to the screen, and he was like all into it. Yeah, I know, it's very exciting, isn't it?
I've noticed that people, I've done a lot of seminars this way, and I've done a lot, of course, in the classroom over the years. I was a classroom teacher for 15 years in my youth, and that I still love that. But I got to say that people seem to have more fun and be more relaxed in a Zoom meeting than they are face to face. So.
Well, and
It's a good
stuff like
idea.
what I've found, you know, just trying to get people to relax and get into the whole concept is like I pick up my coffee cup, you know, so it's like, hey, you guys can have your coffee.
Got your coffee? Are you ready? Are you comfortable? Well, you probably are. You're at home. Here I'm sitting here in my nice, comfortable chair. So it's just a lot easier to and a lot more pleasant to present and attend, I think. Then you're having to travel to a classroom and crappy lighting and uncomfortable seats and all that, and go through this, and then you have to traipse back home. You got to go find your car, and you know, it's raining or something like that. This just beats the living daylights out of that to me.
Yeah, good.
Oh goodness, Elizabeth, it's wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, well, thanks I really appreciate all your help, and I know you probably need to take a break. I hope you're not, oh no, don't do that. I hope you're not going back.
Look at a bird feedback loop set up here.
Yeah, how's your hearing? Are you deaf yet?
Expecting my dog to run here and see what's going on. Okay, well, take care. Yeah, I think I'll go.
I'll get some.
Watch some Netflix or something here.
Yeah, you need a break. So thanks a lot.
Oh, it's so good talking to you. You take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Oh, I know.